The president of Canada Soccer is the latest top sports official to bow to rising pressure and growing scrutiny. Nick Bontis is resigning as head of the organization. He acknowledges a change in leadership is needed. Bontis leaves the organization in the middle of an increasingly bitter contract dispute with players on both the Canadian women's and men's national teams. We're going to begin our coverage of that story this hour with John Molinaro, who's a Canadian soccer journalist. He's been with us on the story for a long time now. John, good to see you this morning, and thanks for beginning our coverage here. The decision to force Nick Bontis' resignation, do you agree with the provinces and territories that that is the change required?
I think so, Heather. I think his position was really untenable. I mean, from players that I've spoken to, both on the men's and the women's side privately, they've told me that they had real questions about his leadership, and they didn't think that they can get any kind of collective bargaining agreement done with him in place. So I think just the labor sort of dispute that's been lingering for an hour just really came to a boil, obviously earlier this month when the Olympic champions, the women's team, went on strike. And I think, that just really sort of had enough in terms of, the federations. They were quite tired of seeing this. They lost confidence in Nick, and I think it was the right decision for him to step down.
So it's not just the leadership issue. Both national teams have also, John, demanded an audit of Canada Soccer's finances and a review of a controversial media and sponsorship deal with a private company called Canada Soccer Business. What is the issue there?
Yeah, so in 2019, Canada Soccer signed a deal with Canada Soccer Business, which essentially Canada Soccer Business gives Canadian Soccer Association guaranteed income of about between $3 to $4 million a year. In return, Canada Soccer Business gets to sell the media rights and sponsorship rights for both the men's and the women's team. With the men's and the women's team doing quite well, obviously the men just competed in the World Cup for the first time in 36 years, and the women are competing, are Olympic champions. That's quite a windfall. There's sponsorships that are lining up, and I'm sure that, that Canada Soccer Business is making a lot of money on this deal. Under normal circumstances, that money would be going to Canada Soccer, but instead it's going to CSB. And so the women and the men's players, they'd like to know, we're having all this success. How come, the money isn't pouring into the program? Instead, we're experiencing budget cuts. So that's their sort of big point of contention with the deal with Canadian Soccer Business.
So there's money involved and the federal government involved too. The Standing Committee, John, on Canadian Heritage has invited members of the women's national team to appear before the committee. It's March the 9th for them to talk about labor issues. They've invited Nick Bontis and also Earl Cochrane, who's the general secretary, to appear as well March the 20th. And according to TSN's reporting, they will subpoena them if they don't agree to appear. Where is that likely to lead?
I don't think Canada Soccer wants any part of going in front of the Standing Committee. I think the point of contention for the men and the women for decades, really, and this goes back to the 90s and 80s, is that the players feel disrespected by Canada Soccer. They've been nickeled and dimed in terms of, payments and stuff like that. They want more transparency, and they really sort of want to open up the books and see how Canada Soccer manages, the finances in its business. So I'm not sure Canada Soccer would be too sort of eager to go to Ottawa and have to open up the books and share those details.
I guess I wonder, what is the effect of all of this on the teams? Is the turmoil continuing? Is it now settled? Because the teams are playing, and thinking of the women particularly, John, the gold medal at the Olympics women team, they're getting set for the World Cup this summer in Australia and New Zealand. So what's the effect on the teams?
Well, I think we saw it a little bit earlier this month when Canada was playing in an exhibition tournament down in the United States called the She Believes Cup. And, they were performed quite poorly in that tournament. I think they were obviously exhausted both mentally and physically just from sort of this labor impasse and everything that's going on behind the scenes. It really took a lot out of them. And, let's not forget, these are the Olympic champions, right? They are, as you said, they're preparing for the World Cup, the biggest tournament in their lives, and it's less than 5 months away. So to have this uncertainty And to have this sort of controversy with the labor situation with Canada Soccer hanging over their heads, it means, they've got to focus on that. And it takes time away from sort of focusing on what's really important, which is, again, competing in the biggest tournament in their lives. So, of course, they're all professionals and, they're not, they don't want to be affected by this, but they're also human beings. So they can't help but be somewhat adversely affected by what's going on with Canada Soccer.
John, what are you going to be watching for next in this story?
Well, as the replacement for Nick Bontis, it's not an appointed position. It's someone has to be elected president, and so I think whoever replaces Nick has a big task on their hands because there's a big gap in terms of trust between the players and Canada Soccer that's been going on, like I said, for decades. So whoever replaces him has to repair that relationship. And they also have to come to a collective bargaining agreement with both the men and the women, and that's going to include pay equity. And, the women have been saying that, Canada Soccer has been dragging its feet on that issue. So, as I said, there's a lot of distrust between both sides, and that relationship is really something that has to be repaired going forward.
I doubt this is our last conversation on the matter. Thank you for this morning, and we'll speak again, John, I'm sure.
Sounds good.
Thanks a lot, John. John Molinaro, big Canadian soccer journalist and our source for great reporting on these stories all the time. Thank you, John.